So, you've spent hours, maybe even days, writing what you think is an absolutely brilliant civil service behavior example. You've polished the grammar, you've practiced the delivery, but have you ever stopped to think about how the assessor actually decides what score to give you? Well, that's exactly what we're going to dive into in this explainer. We're going to demystify how the UK Civil Service evaluates candidates using the Success Profiles framework. We'll look at what these behaviors actually are, how that famous 1 to 7 scoring scale works, and crucially, how to give the panel exactly what they need to give you a top score.
We have a lot of ground to cover today, so here's our agenda. 1. The Success Profile shift. 2. Defining civil service behaviors. 3. Assessment methods. And finally, 4. Scaling across grades.
Let's jump straight into Section 1, the Success Profiles shift, and how recruitment has moved beyond just competencies.
If you look at the modern approach to recruitment, it basically breaks down into 5 elements. In the past, you might have just been tested on your competencies and that was the whole shebang. But under this newer framework, behaviors are really just one of 5 potential assessment areas. Depending on the exact role you're going for, the recruiting manager is going to build a specific profile. They'll pull from your experience, your strengths, your ability, technical skills, and of course, behaviors.
Moving right along to Section 2, defining civil service behaviors, actions that result in effective performance.
The absolute most crucial point to remember is this: behaviors are the actual actions and activities you do. Assessors aren't looking for theoretical answers. They don't want to hear what you would do in a perfect world. They want concrete proof of the actions you actually took that led to success. Because here's the thing, the assessor can only score the evidence you explicitly provide. They aren't going to sit there and assume, oh, they probably consulted stakeholders, or they must have considered the risks. They shouldn't have to fill in the gaps for you. If it matters to demonstrating the behavior, you have to say it out loud.
The Civil Service has identified 9 core behaviors in total. They range from things like seeing the big picture and making effective decisions, all the way to delivering at pace. Now don't panic. Recruiting managers are only going to pick the most relevant ones for your specific role. You are never going to be asked to demonstrate all 9 in a single application. But it does beg the question, how do you actually score highly on the ones they do pick?
A lot of candidates fall into the trap of treating behavior descriptions like a rigid checklist. They try to mechanically cram every single phrase into their answer. Please don't do that. It just leads to a really weak, disjointed answer. Instead, you need to understand how the 1 to 7 scoring scale actually works. In most campaigns, a 4 is effectively your benchmark for an acceptable demonstration. Getting a 4 is good. On the flip side, getting a 1 doesn't mean you did something disastrous. It literally just means no positive evidence. The assessor simply couldn't find the evidence they needed for that specific behavior. So what separates a 4 from a really strong 6 or an outstanding 7? It's not about having a more glamorous story. It's all about the quality and depth of your evidence. Did you explain exactly how and why you took certain actions? Did you show real judgment in a complex situation? To get those top scores, you definitely want to use the STAR method to structure your answer, but spend the vast majority of your time on the action part. That is where your richest behavioral evidence is actually hiding.
All right, Section 3, assessment methods, how you will actually be tested.
The beauty, and sometimes the challenge of this flexible framework, is that your behaviors can be assessed in a bunch of different ways. Sure, you could be asked to recount past experiences in a standard application form or a classic interview. But you might also have to demonstrate a behavior in real time. For instance, a civil service judgment test might throw a scenario at you to see how you'd react on the spot. Or, if you're at an assessment center, they might use a role play or a group exercise to literally watch your working together behavior play out live in action.
And that brings us to Section 4, scaling across grades, from Level 1 to Level 6. Pay close attention, because this part is absolutely critical.
The expectations for these behaviors change drastically depending on your grade. Take a look at the stark contrast for the behavior making effective decisions. If you apply for a Level 1 role, like an administrative assistant, an acceptable demonstration is seeking help, using guidance, and asking colleagues for input. Pretty straightforward, right? But look at Level 6, a director level. They are expected to give unbiased, evidence-led advice directly to ministers based on extensive, robust analysis. It's a completely different ballgame.
Let's break this down just a little bit more. If you are applying at Level 1, notice how the focus across the board is really on understanding your immediate responsibilities. For seeing the big picture, it's about knowing how your specific work contributes to your immediate team. For leadership, it's just about showing enthusiasm and acting fairly and respectfully with your colleagues. The scope is quite narrow, it's focused on task execution and being a really solid team player.
But when we jump up to Level 3, which covers higher and senior executive officers, the expectation elevates significantly. For seeing the big picture, you aren't just looking at your immediate team anymore.
You need to understand the strategic drivers for your area and figure out how to align your activities with wider organizational priorities. Under making effective decisions, you're now expected to empower others to make decisions and present really strong recommendations based on credible, well-researched information. And as we move into senior leadership, the scope becomes incredibly broad. Putting level 4, which is grades 7 and 6, right up against level 5, deputy director, you can clearly see the massive jump. A grade 7 candidate is expected to find the best option from complex and sometimes incomplete evidence. But a deputy director? They have to act decisively and make bold, unbiased decisions at a strategic national level, all while making sense of intense political pressures. Think about it. If a grade 7 candidate gives a totally brilliant example of managing a team project, but they use it to apply for a deputy director role, they are going to score poorly. Why? Because the evidence, even though it's great, doesn't demonstrate the national strategic impact required at level 5.
So before you hit submit on your next application, or before you wrap up your next interview answer, I really want you to ask yourself a hard question. Does your evidence actually match the specific grade level you are applying for? And maybe even more importantly, have you actually given the assessor explicit evidence, or are you expecting them to make assumptions? Remember the golden rule. The panel cannot say, well, I'm sure they had a good reason for choosing that option. If you don't explicitly say it, they literally cannot score it. Don't imply it, evidence it. Make your actions, your reasoning, and your impact crystal clear. Because at the end of the day, that is the fundamental difference between simply telling a good story and giving the panel something they can actually score.